being offered to burglars to keep them quiet. And Richard Nixon said to him, I know where you could get the money. Did anyone say, hey, high crimes and misdemeanors as well as low crimes and low misdemeanors? No. No one said off the table or on the table. But then the American people spoke out. The American people spoke out when Richard Nixon made it plain that he was putting himself above the law. He had a special prosecutor fired who was trying to get tape recordings that would show whether he was responsible for the cover-up of the break-in. He said, get rid of this guy. They're going to investigate me? I'm the president. You can't investigate me. I'm commander-in-chief. You can't investigate me. American people said, wait a minute. We are no longer a banana republic. We never were a banana republic. We're not going to be a banana republic. And you, Mr. President, have to be held accountable. And you, Congress of the United States, you better get your act together and start impeachment proceedings. It was the American people. Impeachment was off the table in 1973, and the American people set that table and put it back on, as Cindy Sheehan said. And we can do it again. The American people can do it again, and we have to do it again. Why? Because this is now at least the second time, if not more, third time, that we have had a president drive this country into military activities on a basis of lies and misstatements and deceptions. As Martin Luther King said when he stood before the Lincoln Memorial in 1963, how much longer? How many more Americans have to die for lies? Not one drop of blood should ever have to be shed for a lie. Ever. We saw that with Lyndon Johnson. We saw that with Richard Nixon. And we have seen it now with George W. Bush. Now, why is lying about a war an impeachable offense? I actually drafted the resolution of impeachment of Richard Nixon for his lying about the Cambodia bombing. It was not adopted by Congress. They were too timid. It would have sent the signal that might have been heard today. But the fact of the matter is that the reason it is an impeachable offense is because matters of war and peace are so grave that under our Constitution and in a democracy, they are not made by the president alone, except if we are imminently about to be attacked or we have to repel an attack that's happening right away. Congress in the Constitution was involved, and that means the people were involved. Why? Because people's lives are at stake. Thousands, tens of thousands, 50,000 Americans died in Vietnam over a lie. 50,000. We're only at almost 3,000 here. And it should never have happened again. Why? Because the framers of the Constitution put the power of war-making into the hands of Congress because they knew that monarchs and executives wanted to take countries into war. Madison wrote, after they framed the Constitution, a letter to Jefferson saying, we deliberately put the war-making powers in the hands of Congress to check presidents because we know they want to take the country into war. Presidents' war-making powers are only there in 3 words. 5 words, Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy. You want to know all the powers that Congress has? Powers to make the laws of war, power to declare war, power to raise armies and navies, power to support the war, power to fund the war. Look at that. And yet Congress was not included, and the people were not included in the decision to go to war because we were told lies. Because the President of the United States did not trust the American people to make up their own mind about this war. It is a subversion of the Constitution. It is a subversion of our democracy. So, and the evidence is clear. I don't want to go into all of it. I'll just say what he said about Saddam Hussein and being in cahoots with Osama bin Laden, and therefore we were entitled to attack Saddam Hussein as payback for 9/11. And when we went into Iraq, because of those lies and deceptions and misstatements, more than 60% of the American people thought that Saddam Hussein was the one responsible for 9/11. The war would never have happened if the President of the United States had told the truth. And then, what about the rest? The President of the United States says that he's above the law. He's commander-in-chief, and there's a law that says can't wiretap. By the way, happens to be a crime, a felony, U.S. felony. Oh, he said, I'm commander-in-chief. I don't have to obey the law. Well, guess what? That law was written because we had seen what Richard Nixon did as president. He said, I want to wiretap national security. I'm the president. I do what I want to do. One of the grounds for his impeachment was illegal wiretapping. And then Congress passed a law saying, we see what a president does when he has unilateral power to wiretap. He wiretaps journalists, his political opponents, his staff, et cetera, et cetera. No, we don't want it. We're going to create a special court. This, by the way, was done in 1978. And since 1978, it's not really hard for presidents to get a wiretapping order approved by this court. They approved 19,000 since 1978 and rejected 5. Not exactly hard, even for this president. So what does the president say? I don't have to pay attention. I'm not going to this court. Forget it. I'm commander-in-chief. I am above the law. Well, not only does the Constitution say that the president's responsibility is to carry out the law, they use a beautiful and elegant phrase saying the president has to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. That means he's got to obey the law and carry out the law. Not only does the president violate that term of the Constitution, but we have a Supreme Court case exactly on point. Now, Laura hasn't, I think, made up the right reading list. I know she's into things, French, Camus, and so forth, but really for next summer, maybe the Constitution should be there. And this case that was written by Justice Jackson called the Steele seizure case. It's really worth reading. And Justice Jackson, who was the chief prosecutor at Nuremberg for the United States, knew what he was talking about. This was a case when President Truman said, we're in the middle of the Korean War, and I'm commander-in-chief. They want to strike the steel mills. How are we going to get the steel for the bullets and the guns and the tanks and the planes and all the rest? They're not striking. I'm commander-in-chief. No strike. I'm seizing the steel mills. The Supreme Court said, wait a minute. You're just commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy. You are not commander-in-chief of the country. George Bush needs to read those words. You are only commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy. You are not commander-in-chief of the country. And they stopped him. And George Bush just invoked history. He said, what would history say if they came back and found out that we didn't do everything we could for peace? Well, I don't know. He started this war. But I want to read you what Justice Jackson said about a president who tries to say that as commander-in-chief he can do what he wants. No penance would ever expiate the sin against free government of holding that a president can escape control of executive powers by law through assuming his military role. No penance would ever expiate that. Well, we have to stop that. We cannot have a president who says he's above the law, whether because he's commander-in-chief or commander of whatever. He is not commander of the country. And we have to